Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Canterbury Tales. By Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer compiled the Canterbury Tales in 1475, a collection of 24 stories, some in verse and others in prose, in Middle English by Geoffrey Chaucer. Spring is described in the general prologue by the narrator as an ideal time of year for pilgrimages. During their journey to Canterbury to visit the shrine of martyred Archbishop St. Thomas Becket, who was assassinated in 1170 by the Knights of King Henry II, the pilgrims tell their stories in a competition. Canterbury Cathedral is home to a shrine dedicated to him. After his death, he became the most revered saint in England. Harry Bailey, the host, has decided that each pilgrim will tell 2 stories on the trip to Canterbury and 2 stories on the way back. The winner will receive a complimentary lunch at the Tabard Inn in Southwark when they return for telling the best narrative. There are a number of notable characters among the pilgrims, including a knight, a prioress, her son the squire, a dyer, a shipman, a second nun, a knight's yeoman, a monk, a cook, a friar, an attorney, a carpenter, a franklin, a man of law, a weaver, a tapestry maker, a haberdasher, a doctor. English folklore, the subject matter of the tales, was a favorite pastime. Because the knight has the shortest stick drawn, the pilgrims conclude that he is the rightful teller of the first story. The Knight's Tale. It tells the story of 2 Thebes-based knights, Arcite and Palamon, who are captured in combat and imprisoned by King Theseus in Athens. Theseus' sister-in-law Melie, Hippolyta's sister, is imprisoned in a tower, and both men fall in love with her. Theseus is asked to release a prisoner who is a friend of Arcite's, and Palamon subsequently manages to escape on his own. Melie's page, Palamon, escapes and fights with Arcite, who returns to the court of Athens disguised as a servant, a page in the Melie chamber. Theseus intervenes, and the fight is finished. For the sake of Melie's love, Theseus sets up a contest between 2 knights, each of whom receives an army and a deadline of 1 year. Melie prays to Diana for a happy marriage, while Melie prays to Arcite for triumph, and Palamon prays to Venus for Arcite's hand in marriage to Melie. Saturn decides to mediate a dispute between the gods who hear the petitions. Arcite prevails in their battle, but he is accidentally thrown from his horse and dies as a result of the tragedy. Melie is his rightful wife, he says before he dies, and he makes peace with Palamon. Melie is Palamon's second wife. As soon as the knight finishes his narrative, everyone is happy with its honorable features, and the hostess tells the monk to tell the next story, but the miller, who is quite inebriated, insists that he go next. The Miller's Tale. The Miller's Tale tells the narrative of Nicholas, a poor college student who moves in with John and Allison, a carpenter's wife who is much younger than he is. Absalom, a young parish clerk, falls in love with her as well, and the 2 become inseparable. Nicholas convinces John that a deluge like Noah's is imminent, and the only way they can survive is to sleep in separate tubs placed on the roofs of their homes. In the meantime, Nicholas and Allison get into bed together, but are disturbed by Absalom, who sings out of the window of Allison's chamber. When she kisses him, she tells him to close his eyes. So, he kisses her bottom, and she lowers her pants so he can kiss her crotch. Absalom returns to Allison with a hot iron from a blacksmith after being humiliated. Absalom marks Nicholas' rear as a result of Nicholas's employment of the same tactic. The noise wakes up John, who had been sleeping on the roof, who calls out for water. He cuts the rope because he thinks the water is coming and falls through the floor of the home and into the cellar, breaking his arm in the process. Oswald the Reeve, a carpenter, is outraged by the miller's story because he thinks the miller was trying to degrade carpenters. The Reeve's Tale. The Reeve's Tale tells the narrative of a con artist named Miller Simkin, who preyed on a number of institutions, including a Cambridge University. When John and Aylin, 2 Cambridge students, travel to the miller's house to buy grain and meal, Simkin lets their horses run free and steals their flour, which he had ground for them to take. It's already dark when the pupils get their horses, so they'll have to spend the night with Simkin. Aylin seduces the miller's daughter, Molly, and John seduces the miller's wife in the span of 1 night. When Aylin mistakenly tells Simkin about his travels, thinking he is John, because it was dark, they get into a fight. When the miller's wife wakes up, she is certain that the devil has arrived and smacks Simkin in the head with a staff, knocking him unconscious. The Cook's Tale. This tale was supposed to follow Reeve's tale, but it only exists as a portion of it. Perkin Reveller, an apprentice called Perkin, who is nicknamed this because he rinks and dances so much that people refer to him as such, tells the cook's narrative because the Reeve's tale was so popular. Finally, Perkin's boss tells Perkin he prefers his apprentice to go out and have fun than to stay at home and ruin the rest of the servants' morale. Friends with a history of alcohol abuse and gambling are a good fit for Perkin's new home. His wife is a sex offender. The story stops abruptly at 58 lines. Man of Law's Tale. To begin, here is a tale from a man of the law. Chaucer has already narrated the story of Constance, the daughter of the Roman emperor, who is betrothed to the Syrian Muslim sultan provided that he becomes a Christian. The man of law apologizes and narrates the story of Constance. The sultan's mother and servants, driven to madness by his edict to convert the country away from Islam, remain secretly devout Muslims. Pretending to provide a dinner for her son and the Christians, Sultan's mother assassinates the Sultan and the Christians, narrowly escaping with the life of her only child, Constance. In Northumberland, she is rescued by a warden and his wife, Dame Hermegild, who take her in and raise her as their own daughter. They become Christians as a result of her ministry. A young knight falls in love with Constance one evening, but when she rejects him, Satan has him kill her and use the body of Dame Hermegild as evidence against her. Even though the knight refuses to swear that Constance killed Hermegild when asked by King Alla of Northumberland, his eyes explode after he is knocked to the ground, revealing his guilt. While Alla is engaged in battle in Scotland, he marries Constance and gives birth to their son, Mauritius. Through forging letters between Alla and his wife, which claimed that the kid was ugly and cursed, Lady Donegild succeeds in having Constance exiled. Constance and her kid are sent away immediately on the ship on which she arrived after intercepting Alla's response, which urges that the boy should be cherished and kept despite his abnormality. In this fashion, Constance is once more escorted out of the country, and her ship comes across a Roman vessel. When she returns to Rome, no one recognizes her as the emperor's daughter since she is being transported there by a senator. It is at this point in the story that King Alla returns to Rome on pilgrimage, when the Emperor of Rome realizes that Mauritius is his grandson and names him as the new Emperor of Rome. The Wife of Bath. The host asks the parson to deliver the next narrative after the Man of Law's tale, but the parson refuses because he claims the host swore at him, and the two get into a fight. The Wife of Bath begins her tale by giving the pilgrims a detailed account of her emotions toward marriage and the 5 husbands she has had. Biblical quotes are used by the wife to demonstrate how she was able to dominate all of her husbands by marrying them multiple times. When she needed money, she made the first 3 of them feel bad and refused to have sex with them. However, my last 2 marriages were both young and difficult to deal with. Unlike the Wife of Bath, Jenkins' age was not a factor in her decision to marry him. Due to his disobedience to the Wife of Bath's rule and his interest in books advocating female submission, he caused a lot of havoc for her. Jenkins struck her after she tore a page out of his book, and since then she's been deaf in one ear. Afterwards, he was remorseful, and he and his wife lived happily ever after. The friar interrupts and complains that her stories are too long, and the summoner responds that friars are like flies, always looking for a way to get their hands on the facts. To each other, the friar and the summoner promise to swap stories about a summoner and a friar. The host yells at everyone to settle down and allow the wife to begin her story. King Arthur's Knight, the Wife of Bath's Tale, is sentenced to death for raping a young woman in the Wife of Bath's Tale. Arthur's queen spares him, though, if he can find the solution to the question what do women want? Until he meets an ugly old woman, the knight is unable to come up with a good answer for his question. When he tells the queen that ladies desire to be in control of their husbands and their own fate, she agrees and frees him. The knight, on the other hand, later reveals that he is not a fan of her looks. This woman claims to be able to play both roles as her husband's future wife, old and unattractive yet submissive. It's her choice, the knight argues, and as a return for allowing her have power over the marriage, she'll be loyal and beautiful. The Friar's Tale. By way of apology, the friar will tell the narrative of a lecherous summoner once the Wife of Bath has finished her story, and the summoner is asked to forgive him. The summoner promises the friar that he will return with a story to back up his word. An evil summoner is the focus of the friar's tale. His summoner, who has several eavesdroppers working for him, tells him who is being lecherous, and he talks of an archdeacon who has no mercy when it comes to enforcing the law, especially against lechers. The summoner extorts money from the people he has to summon by charging them more than he should. He meets a traveling yeoman who turns out to be the devil while delivering church court summons. The devil assures the summoner that if he continues to do his craft, they will meet in hell one day, and the two share their trade secrets. In order to avoid excommunication, the summoner visits an elderly woman and hands her a summons. He then offers to bribe her. The elderly woman is adamant that she hasn't sinned and curses him as a result. Suddenly, the devil appears and escorts the summoner to hell. The summoner's tale. To make amends for what the friar had done to him, the summoner has asked that the pilgrims allow him to tell the next narrative. When a friar wondered why none of the individuals he saw in hell were friars, an angel pulled up Satan by his tail so that 20,000 of them emerged from his backside, and the friar was astonished to see that none of the people he saw were friars. There is a new onslaught on the friars in the summoner's tale. According to the story, an innkeeper Thomas and his wife, as well as the friar who resides with him, have been neglecting their responsibilities to the church and attending services less frequently. When the innkeeper explains that he hasn't been to church in a while due to his illness and the tragic death of his daughter, the friar requests for additional money. As a gesture of goodwill, Thomas farts on the friar's head. The squire of the lord of the manor promises to distribute the fart equally among all friars after the friar complains. The clerk's tale. The host begs the clerk, an Oxford student who had been silent throughout the ride, to give a cheerful story, and the clerk agrees and begins reciting a story by Petrarch. When the people of his province begin to grumble about his long-standing bachelor status, an Italian marquis named Walter makes a decision to wed. Walter marries Griselda, a devout peasant who is beloved by all for her hard work and impeccable morals. In order to see if she can keep her word, Walter devises a series of tests. When Walter's daughter is born, he tells his wife that his people are unhappy and want the child to be killed. While pretending to commit suicide with her, he snatches the child away and hands it over to his sister. Their second child, a son, is the same, he claims. Walter tells Griselda that the Pope wants him to divorce her at the end. He tries to get her out of the house. Griselda is a patient man who can take any catastrophe in stride. Walter makes a life-altering decision and returns with his two children. A phony bride is introduced to Griselda, who is later revealed to be their daughter, and informs her that he wants to get married again. They are reunited with their family. Walter tells her that the divorce was a ruse, and they can now live in peace because she is his wife for life. The clerk concludes his tale by urging ladies to emulate Griselda's devotion to duty. The merchant's tale. While Griselda is praised for her character, Merchant claims that his wife is not the patient woman depicted by clerk. He accepts the host's request to talk about the difficulties of marriage. As a result, he recounts the tale of the cheating wife. Despite the advice of his friends and the concerns of his brother Placebo, the merchant's tale tells the story of an elderly blind knight who marries a much younger woman. Despite the fact that January and May have gotten married, May quickly grows tired of January's sexual antics and decides to cheat on him with his squire Damien. After she tells him she wants a pair, he helps her climb into the tree and she sleeps with Damien there till she returns home. Pluto, the fairy king, and Proserpina, his queen, descend on Damien and May, and Pluto restores January's sight so that he can see what is going on. Everything works out for the best for both of them when May tells January that he shouldn't believe his eyes, which have since recovered from blindness. As the merchant describes his ideal woman, the host begs God to spare him from marrying one like her. The squire's tale. In response to the host's request, the squire gladly speaks on his personal favorite subject, love. However, his story remains untold. When the squire's tale begins, a strange knight arrives at the court of Tartary, bringing presents from the Arabian and Indian kings. Sword and mechanical brass horse are given to Cambyses of the Mongol Empire as presents by the knight, who wishes to travel the world and return to the Mongol Empire within the span of one day. Candace, Cambyses' daughter, receives a magic mirror that can tell the truth from lies, as well as a ring imbued with the power to decipher the bird language and the healing properties of plants, from him. This ring is used by Candace to save a dying female falcon who relates the story of how her lover abandoned her for the love of someone else. This part of Chaucer's Squire's Tale is cut off by the Franklin, who states he wants his kid to be just as articulate as the squire. His interruption has been irritating the host and he orders him to begin the next story. The Franklin's Tale. The Franklin announces that the story he is about to tell is a song from Brittany. Arviragus and Dorigen's marriage is the subject of Franklin's tale. Arviragus is on a military expedition, and Dorigen is worried that his ship will be dashed against the rocks when he returns from his travel. Despite her attraction to Aurelius, another young man, she rejects him. For the sake of their relationship, she'll only get involved in bed with him if he removes all the rocks from the coast, something she considers impossible. Aurelius hires a magic student to create an illusion that causes the pebbles to vanish from view. After then, Arviragus shows up. Arviragus resolves to uphold his pledge to Dorigen after she tells him the truth about the agreement. At first, young Aurelius is blown away by the noble act of Arviragus before he generously absolves him of the pledge. The magic trick then frees the young Aurelius from the debt. How generous and noble was each character in this story. The Physician's Tale. Virginius, a brave Roman warrior with a stunning daughter named Virginia, is the subject of the Physician's Tale. Appius, the town judge, was enamored with Virginia and convinced a scumbag named Claudius to allege in court that Virginius had taken Virginia, his slave. In accordance with Appius' instructions, Virginius must hand over his daughter to Claudius. Virginius advises his daughter to choose between dying and being disgraced after learning that Appius and Claudius conspired to allow him to rape his daughter. She accepts her father's plan to sever her head. Virginius decides that his daughter must die, so he dismembers her and delivers the severed head to Appius and Claudius. Appius and Claudius have been exposed as liars by the Roman people, who are shocked by this revelation. Appius banishes Claudius and sentences Virginius to death in the same place where he committed suicide. The Pardoner's Tale. Because of the Physician's Tale's shocking inequity, the host requests a light-hearted tale from the pardoner. Others on the pilgrimage disagree with the host and demand a moral story. Once he has eaten and drink, the pardoner agrees to do so. The pardoner begins his story by confessing to the pilgrims that he is a con artist who takes advantage of people by convincing them that money is the root of all evil. He divulges their trade secrets, which include saints' relics, which he dismisses as useless. 3 rowdy teenagers set out to assassinate Death in the Pardoner's Tale. 8 bushels of gold are found by an old man who tells them they'll find Death in the woods, but they're preparing to sneak into town after the sun goes down. 2 of the rioters plot to kill the youngest of the rioters by sending him into town to bring them food and drink for the night. Another rioter returns with a deadly poison in an attempt to seize every ounce of gold. His friends stab him when he returns, then drink the wine and perish from its poison under the tree. Consequently, the 3 rioters find death in the guise of lust. At the end of his tale, the pardoner makes an imprecation against sin, pleading with the travelers to pay him money in exchange for forgiveness and to be pardoned, and he summons the host to come kiss his own relic. The host, on the other hand, accuses him of deception. The knight is able to persuade the 2 to put their differences aside and make amends. The Shipman's Tale. A thrifty merchant and his adulterous wife star in The Shipman's Tale, the next tale in the collection. In order to alleviate her financial woes, the merchant's wife approaches a close friend, a monk, who she confides in about how miserable her marriage is. As a result, she offers to have sex with him as compensation. Having duped her, the monk takes the money from the merchant and delivers it to her in exchange for sleeping with his wife and having an affair with her husband's mistress. When the merchant comes to ask for the money back, the monk claims to have given it to his wife as a gift. She tells him that she will pay it back to her husband in bed when he confronts her with the merchant. The host is impressed by the shipman's story and invites the prioress to tell her own. The prioress agrees. The Prioress' Tale. Her story is guided by the Virgin Mary, according to the prioress. An Asian city ruled by a sinful Jewish population is the setting for the Prioress' Tale, a fable about a Christian youngster. The town's Christian school is located just on the edge of the town's Jewish neighborhood. On his walk home from school as a 7-year-old kid from a widow's family, he learned the Alma Redemptoris, gracious Mother of the Redeemer, an adoring song of praise to Mary. Because of his bad behavior, the Jews kidnapped him and cut his throat, then dumped him in the toilet. Even though the boy's mother looks for him all around town, the Jews won't tell her where he might be hiding. Because the Virgin Mary had placed grain on his tongue, He was able to speak until the grain was removed, thus he surprisingly started singing Alma Redemptoris when he was found by her. It is after the grain is taken that the boy dies and ascends to God's kingdom. The magistrate decides to execute the assassinating Jews by having wild horses pull them apart and then hanging them. Anguish over the loss of the young Christian boy is expressed, along with a curse directed at those Jews who did the atrocity. The Tale of Sir Thopas. The host asks Chaucer to tell a story after joking about his looks. The Tale of Sir Thopas, Chaucer's sole other story, is a poem in rhyming couplets, a parody of terrible poetry, and it only serves to irritate the audience even further. Sir Thopas rides his horse in search of an elf queen to marry until he encounters a giant. The host has had enough and tells Chaucer to stop narrating and instead tell a different story. In order to improve Chaucer's rhyming, he encourages him to tell them a story in prose rather than in rhyme. The Tale of Melibbe. The Parson's Tale is Chaucer's only other prose story, and it is followed by the Tale of Melibbe. When Melibbe, a terrified king, and his wife Prudence are ambushed by their foes, they brutally beat Prudence to death and inflict horrific wounds on his daughter Sophie. As Prudence cautions him against declaring war on his adversaries and urges him to show mercy, the two engage in a lengthy discussion over how he should proceed. As a final resort, Melibbe offers those who have wronged her the choice of receiving punishment from him or from her. It is up to Melibbe to decide what happens to the authors, and he disinherits and expels them. In the end, he leaves the vengeance for his enemies in her capable hands. Forgiveness is a Christian virtue, and she shows it by forgiving those who have wronged her. The Monk's Tale. A patient wife like Melibbe's is what the host desires, and he asks the monk to tell the following story. Despite this, the host teases him, noting that he's definitely no shabby monk. Many literary and historical luminaries who have fallen from favor are featured in the Monk's Tale. In addition to Lucifer, Adam, and Samson, there are also Hercules, Bernabo Visconti, Julius Caesar, Nero Zenobia, Belshazzar, and Croesus in this list. Both the knight and the host agree to put a halt to the Monk's Tale since they believe the monk's retelling of tragedies to be tedious and sad. The Nun's Priest's Tale. Afterward, the knight interrupts the monk's narration and then requests the priest of the nuns to recount something more vibrant. Chanticleer the rooster and Pertelote the hen are the stars of the Nun's Priest's Tale. It was one of those nights that Chanticleer fell ill and had an awful dream about a fox who tricked him into closing his eyes and crowing. Pertelote reassures him that his dream was caused by his uneven humor and that he should locate some herbs to be healed, assuaging his fears that it is prophetic. Even yet, Chanticleer continues to believe that his dreams are omens, but he eventually comes around to what his wife has been saying all along. There's no doubt that Chanticleer gets caught and brought back to town by the barnyard fox. However, Chanticleer is released after tricking the fox into opening its mouth so that Chanticleer can from the scene. The Second Nun's Tale. Host praises the nun's priest, and Chaucer continues with the Second Nun's Tale. Saint Cecilia's life serves as a role model for her novel because of her insightful lessons and deeds, as she explains in her prologue. She talks about the martyrdom of Saint Cecilia. During the time of the Roman Empire, it was illegal for Christians to convert. She converts her husband Valerian and brother Tiberius to Christianity. When she is executed, she is slashed 3 times with a sword, just like her husband and brother, but she does not die immediately. A few days after her death, she directs that her property be given to the destitute. Pope Urban declares her to be a saint after she passes away. The Canon's Yeoman's Tale. Second nun finishes her story, and the pilgrims are joined by canon, alchemist, and yeoman who had heard about the pilgrims and their storytelling contest, which they had decided to participate. Initially, the yeoman lavishes the canon with praise, but later retracts it, and the canon is enraged and abruptly departs. A story about a canon who deceived a priest is what the yeoman intends to tell. One of the most popular stories in the Canon's Yeoman's Tale is about a canon's work and how they fool people by generating alchemical illusions. The Manciple's Tale. To keep the pilgrims entertained, the host instructs their cook, who rides in the back with them, to tell a narrative, but the cook is so inebriated that he is unable to give a story at all. That's why the Manciple tells him a story about his inebriated antics. Metamorphoses by Ovid and the Arabian Nights Tale. The Manciple's Tale are the inspirations for this White Crow folklore. The story tells how Phoebus became a vengeful husband in mortal form. He was on the lookout for his wife's infidelity. An adorable white crow, Phoebus's best friend, could communicate in human language and sing brilliantly. When Phoebus learns that his wife had an affair, he plucks the white crow's feathers and casts him out, damning it with blackness. According to the Manciple, this is the reason for the crow's unappealing black coloration and their inability to sing. Parson's Tale. Once they get at their destination, a village host requests that a parson tell a story for the group to enjoy. A long lecture on the 7 deadly sins is the parson's final tale, since he does not want to break St. Paul's prohibition by narrating fiction. Instead of telling a novel, Parson's Tale is a long sermon about the nature of sin and what it takes to be forgiven, contrition, confession, and satisfaction, or satisfaction with oneself. Explanations for each of the 7 deadly sins are included in the story to show how people can be saved. Retraction. People who were upset should blame Chaucer's lack of manners and education because he had no immoral intents, and others who found value in his tales should give Christ all the credit for their usefulness. All of his works about secular and pagan characters are retracted by a prayer for forgiveness, asking his audience to remember him for his sermons and works about the lives of saints. Characters. Chaucer's characters are stereotypes and distinct individuals that represent their class, profession, gender, age, or other type. Each character is detailed in great depth, including their build, facial features, unique attributes, clothes, likes, and dislikes, to give the impression that they are actual historical individuals. Chaucer has done an excellent job of balancing the positive and negative characteristics of the various characters and classes he depicts. The host, Harry Bailey, is the proprietor of the Tabard Inn, where pilgrims en route to Canterbury stop before embarking on their journey. As a volunteer, he offers to accompany them on their journey and promises to satisfy them all, to serve as their arbitrator and guide, and to adjudicate on their tales of travel. This man has a clear sense of social superiority, as seen by his frequent displays of obeisance to people in positions of authority. The knight was a brave and honorable combatant who took part in the Crusades. He is the pilgrimage's most important social figure, symbolizing the virtues of chivalry, truth, and honor. Because of his grandeur and position, he stands out among the other pilgrims. His son, the squire, is always by his side when they're on the road. The yeoman travels with the knight. He doesn't tell a story. He's skilled with a bow and arrow, and he's also an accomplished woodcarver. The squire, the son of the knight, is the only pilgrim with literary ambitions other than Chaucer's, and he enjoys singing, dancing, writing poetry, riding a horse, jousting, and aspires to become a knight one day. He sees himself as a gentleman. He begins a story about the gifts a knight brings to Tartary's king, but he doesn't finish it. The miller stops the host and tells the host that he wants his narrative to come next, and warns the pilgrims that his story about the carpenter would be a nasty one, which is accurate. He is well versed in a wide range of depraved tales. The weaver, one of the 5 guildsmen accompanying visitors to Canterbury's shrine, is silent throughout their journey. But the dyer is also one of the 5 guildsmen accompanying the pilgrims to the shrine who doesn't have anything to say about the journey. The carpenter is one of the 5 guildsmen accompanying the pilgrims to the shrine, but he does not share a story. The tapestry maker is one of 5 guildsmen accompanying pilgrims to the shrine, although he does not narrate a story. The haberdasher is one of the 5 guildsmen accompanying the pilgrims to the shrine, but he refuses to give a story. The plowman is a dedicated worker who doesn't gossip about his neighbors and who always pays his tithe to the church. The reeve is a grumpy old carpenter with a short fuse who used to work for the crown. He finds the story of the old carpenter told by the miller repulsive. After reading the miller's tale, he has his own version of how 2 Oxford students shamed a terrible miller. The man of law, also known as the sergeant of law, is a high-ranking member of the judiciary. He is well-off, careful, and enlightened, making him one of the more refined members of the band of pilgrims. He knows many laws and court cases. He relates a story about Constance, a Christian woman who endures many hardships but is ultimately saved by her steadfast devotion to her faith. Roger, the cook, is the best cook in the land, but he has a pus-filled ulcer on his stomach. He's a scumbag who frequently gets into fights. He tells a story that sounds like it might be made up. There is a pause in his narrative. The wife of Bath, Alison, is depicted as having gat teeth, being partially deaf, being opinionated and noisy, and donning vivid crimson red stockings. Female supremacist and feminist, she has 5 spouses, the latest one half her age, loves her freedom and is sensual. She is the most extravagant of the travelers. She is currently looking for a new husband. She's convinced she's an expert on the subject of romantic love. Women, she argues, are just interested in having power over males. Hubert, the friar, is a sleazy, sex-crazed pedophile who arranges women's marriages. He is a sex addict, a hypocrite, a lover of the finer things in life, and he knows taverns better than the poor's homes. He's a greedy jerk who cares more about generating money than he does about saving others from their transgressions. His story slams summoners for their depravity. The summoner is a church official that summons people to appear at church trials. He is hideous, terrifying youngsters with his pimples, complexion, and boils, and his skin is afflicted with dreadful scales. However, he sometimes accepts bribes and looks the other way when people are summoned to the church court for their crimes. Even though he uses the same Latin words over and over, he loves to dazzle everyone by spouting off a few Latin phrases. He parodies the friar's profession by telling a story in response to the one they told about summoners. The clerk is a sincere, educated, and devoted Oxford student who is appreciated by the Tabard and Company. Due to his love of reading, his finances are limited. He has a low voice and doesn't talk too much. His plot is around Griselda, a poor woman who marries a wealthy guy who cruelly tests her commitment to him. The merchant is an arrogant, smart, and intelligent individual who is obsessed with profit margins and knows just what to do to get a good deal. However, he is in debt, but no one is aware of this due to his cunning. When a blind old guy marries an unfaithful young woman, it makes for a funny narrative. The Franklin is a well-off landowner who likes excellent life, particularly gastronomic delights, and good company. He accompanies the man of law wherever he goes, and everyone gets a taste of his food and wine. He tells the story of a woman who promises to have an affair with a man if he can save her husband, who is away at war. The shipman is a massive man who is capable of steering a ship, but he has little regard for human life. It is told that a woman agrees to sleep with the monk in order to repay her husband a debt, but the monk instead steals from her husband and deceives her. The prioress is a lady of impeccable grace and demeanor. A sentimental woman who loves animals and wears a brooch inscribed with the Latin phrase "Love conquers all," has impeccable table manners and eats like an aristocrat. When a tiny tragedy occurs, such as the death of a mouse, she breaks down in tears. However, she is simply a superficially sophisticated woman. Jewish haters assassinated the boy because he was chanting praises to Mary. The physician is a wealthy physician who enjoys gold and prospers amid the Black Plague in the early 1300s. He has a wide range of knowledge in the fields of medicine, astrology, and humor. The physician narrates the tale of a father who murders his daughter in order to keep her from being exposed as a bad father. The pardoner is by far the most difficult pilgrim to understand. He is a crook and a liar who tries to sell salvation to the lost. For him, psychology is his weapon of choice. He may not be a good person, but his sermons are wonderful, no matter how bad. The pardoner is a morally depraved individual who convinces people that they are sinners who must pay him for his pardons. An allegory about 3 rioters who die because of their lust is the subject of his story. The pardoner tells this story to sell his pardons to the pilgrims, but the host silences him. A monk is a person who takes care of the monastery's possessions. In contrast to the harsh conditions of the monastery, he is a happy and slender man, and he enjoys nice wine and food as well as hunting and taverns. As the second nun and the prioress companion, the monk is a strong and masculine man. The nun's priest is a priest of the church that accompanies nuns when they are ready to confess their sins. The second nun is a pious nun and the prioress secretary. She begins her story right away because she believes that inactivity can lead to vice. She relates the account of Saint Cecilia in the second nun's story. The canon is an enigmatic and menacing figure. He is not one of the pilgrims, but instead enters with his servant, the yeoman, who then departs when his master's yeoman divulges too much about his line of work. The canon's yeoman is the canon's helper, and he freely discusses his master's alchemy techniques, leading the canon to decide to abandon the pilgrims. After realizing his mistake, the yeoman narrates a narrative of how the canon was deceived by his master. The manciple is a law school steward. In spite of being less brilliant than other law students, he is savvy and devious enough to save money, even outsmarting the professionals. The Manciple, a lawyer, tells the pilgrims a legend about a white crow who informed deity Phoebus that his wife was having an affair, which explains the dark color and terrible tone of crow's noises. The parson is a devout, morally upright religious guy who generously provides to his underprivileged parishioners despite his extreme poverty. Helping those in need doesn't matter whether it's raining or snowing. To others, he and others try to set an example. I admire him because he is a good person and has strong morals. He narrates a moral story on the various kinds of sins that people do. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.